folks. My name is Maureen Yap, and I'm the VP of Public Policy and Senior Counsel for Fair Lending at the National Fair Housing Alliance. The National Fair Housing Alliance is the only national organization dedicated solely to fighting housing and lending discrimination. We're also an umbrella group for about 150 local fair housing groups across the nation, including some of them that are here today. So thank you so much for having me, and we're going to get started, and Michelangelo is going to help me with the slides. So I love the theme of today's discussion. The buck stops here, fair housing and the importance of local enforcement. The work that you all do, your engagement, the fact that you care about housing is more important than ever. I'm going to talk to you today about the fair and affordable housing crisis, a little bit about the Trump administration's actions that are worsening that crisis, and then some things that we can do, and then I'd love to save a little bit of time for questions, so have your questions ready. Next slide, please. So first, the fair and affordable housing crisis. Next slide, please. So we call it a fair housing crisis, and this is not news to you, but we have a record number of fair housing discrimination complaints. The majority of the complaints are related to discrimination on the basis of disability, but we've also seen complaints on the basis of harassment and domestic violence skyrocket throughout the nation. Also, there is a wide and persistent Black, white, and Latino white homeownership gap and wealth gap. With respect to the homeownership gap, the gap between the Black homeownership rate and the white homeownership rate is actually larger than it was when discrimination was legal. That means before 1968, before passage of the Fair Housing Act. Also, we see continued housing segregation. So we see that some of the areas that were formerly redlined and underserved remain that way. And a lot of them tend to be majority Black or majority Latino communities. And they don't have the same access that majority white communities have to transportation, to good jobs, to good schools. So this continues to be a problem in the United States. Next slide, please. We're also in the midst of an affordable housing crisis. And living here around Northern Virginia or Arlington, Virginia, this is not news to you. But I'll go over a couple of the facts. So we have an unprecedented number of renters that are what we call cost burdened. And cost burdened means that folks are spending more than 30% of their income on rent. And of course that burden also falls disproportionately on Black and Latino renters. In addition, again, not news to you, for those living here, we have record high homeownership costs. And it's not just a problem here in Arlington, Virginia. For so many communities across the nation, the average family, the cost of homeownership makes homeownership unaffordable and out of reach for them. And then compounding this issue for both renters and homeowners is escalating homeowners' insurance costs due to climate change. So in so many communities, folks who have long held their home have to figure out how they're going to pay homeowners' insurance costs as those costs keep rising. And in some areas, they've even lost the ability to insure their home. No insurers will insure their home, which means that they are one climate crisis away from losing all the equity and wealth that they built up in their home. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk about the Trump administration actions as they affect housing and lending. This part will not be fun, spoiler alert. But what we've tried to do at the National Fair Housing Alliance is take this kind of fire hose of information and break it into certain categories so we can understand the big picture of what's happening in housing and lending. Next slide, please. So first we'll talk about the administration actions that are increasing housing costs for the average renter and homeowner. The National Association of Home Builders has publicly stated that the tariffs and attacks on immigration are making it almost impossible for them to build new homes, especially affordable housing. So it's not a secret that a lot of the backbone of housing construction comes from immigration. But what you may not know is that there's always been, or there has recently been, a shortage of skilled trades, and those are mainly fueled by immigrant labor. And with the attacks on immigration, the National Association of Home Builders is stating that they're having a really hard time finding folks to fill the skilled trades. Also, the administration has delayed key infrastructure projects that were passed as part of the Biden administration, billions of dollars that were supposed to go out to communities. Also, the Federal Housing Finance Agency, which oversees Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, has repealed tenant protections that were supposed to come through the financing of multifamily housing. Also, HUD's FHA has repealed consumer protections and appraisals. These were put together to address the horrible problem of families of color getting an undervaluation unless they had a white friend show their home. But these protections were meant to help everyone, give everyone the chance to appeal the finding of the value of their home. And now it's gone. And then just recently, the U.S. Veterans Administration has discontinued foreclosure protections, a special program that they had developed to do outreach to those VA borrowers who were seriously delinquent. And so now this puts tens of thousands of veterans and their families in jeopardy of losing their home. Next slide, please. The third area is rolling back established housing rights for people of all backgrounds. And so we know that right out of the gate, the administration attacked diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility programs, but we know it's so much broader than that. In addition, they've repealed protections against discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. HUD has said that they will no longer enforce their equal access rule, which was meant to protect against discrimination in federally assisted housing on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. We also anticipate that they will be issuing a proposed rule to significantly scale back those protections. The administration has also repealed many existing immigrant rights to receive FHA loans. And of course, in the middle of the night at the end of February, HUD rescinded fair housing grants for local fair housing groups, about half of the local fair housing groups across the nation, with no explanation. NFHA has a lawsuit that has given some of the sort of a stay on the rescission of the fair housing groups grants, but it's not enough to give fair housing groups the chance to plan. And then yesterday, when the Trump administration dropped their budget, they are proposing to completely zero out fair housing grants for the Fair Housing Initiatives program, as well as zero out CDBG funds. So a lot of hard hits to housing. FHFA has also pulled back support for down payment assistance. This is a program authorized by statute by the Equal Credit Opportunity Act for what's called special purpose credit programs. And that means down payment assistance, flexible underwriting, etc., for formerly redlined areas or other areas that have experienced discrimination. And then last week, the Trump administration ordered agencies to disregard what's called the disparate impact theory of discrimination. We know that oftentimes the way discrimination works, it's not obvious, there's no smoking gun, there's maybe not a specific statement, especially with complex systems like lending systems, artificial intelligence. So we use disparate impact theory to establish and follow the court's guidance in terms of how to establish discrimination. And in 2015, the Supreme Court upheld the disparate impact theory under the Federal Fair Housing Act. However, the administration has just decided that they're just going to disregard it, and they may overturn some of the cases that were used and built on the disparate impact theory. Next slide, please. The administration is also ignoring the threat to local communities from climate change. They have terminated HUD's $1 billion Green and Resilient Retrofit program that was meant to bolster many homes and communities against climate change. Also, they've undermined equity in the CDBG disaster recovery to ensure that those funds were provided in an equitable manner across communities. Of course, now the new budget proposes no CDBG funds. They also, FHFA rescinded the climate-related risk management lens that was supposed to guide Fannie and Freddie as they think of the risk posed by the mortgages that they buy. And finally, they've also cut NOAA staff, which is the National Weather Service, which means that puts our communities at risk because we might not have the early warning of impending climate disasters that we typically have. Next slide, please. And it's no secret living in this area that we are all really hard hit by the administration eviscerating key agencies that provide people with access to fair and affordable housing. The administration has pivoted the U.S. Department of Justice from embracing civil rights to attacking those who uphold civil rights. HUD has also been eviscerated, a lot of pressure to take early retirement, take early outs, in addition to eviscerating some of the key programs like fair housing grants. Also, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has been asked to stop their work, and the Federal Housing Finance Agency has put their entire fair lending team on administrative leave, as well as fired some of the fair lending officers at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So in total, that means at the federal level, there's really no one watching fair housing and fair lending. Next slide, please. Last, the administration is jeopardizing people's data privacy and protections from unfair algorithms, allowing DOJ and ICE access to our non-public personal data. It's not clear what DOJ is doing, but ICE is using it to target immigrant families. They've also rescinded their responsible AI framework, and my most recent favorite, they've empowered a college junior with no expertise in government or housing to rewrite HUD's regulations using AI. No idea how they're going to do that. Next slide, please. So there are various things we can do. Next slide, please. And there's a lot of areas of resilience, and I assume that a lot of you are already involved in these. So this is my boss, Lisa Rice, she's fabulous, at the hands-off housing in front of HUD. A lot of grassroots organizing. We communicate with the press, try to get them educated. Many of the states are standing up and doing a wonderful job. The courts have upheld our rights in several areas. The last three need a little work, the corporations, Congress, and academia, but even there we're starting to see sprouts in areas of resilience. Next slide, please. If you take away one thing, the most important thing is for us to tell our stories. We get that question again and again when we go up to the Hill to advocate for fair housing. A lot of folks still don't understand what fair housing means, what it means for them specifically in their community. So I'll just share with you the story of the Fair Housing Group on the left. These are taken from materials we prepared when they went up to members of Congress to lobby for fair housing grants. So the New York Fair Housing Group had done an investigation based on an intake where a woman had been propositioned by a landlord who offered her a discount on rent in exchange for sex. And by the time they had completed their investigation, they found that this landlord's bad acts went back for generations. And so they worked with the Department of Justice to make sure that he was never in contact with the tenants, but he was allowed to keep the ownership of the property. So now the consent decree has expired, the landlord is back in contact with the tenants, and this Fair Housing Group does not have the funds to educate the community about their fair housing rights. These are really important stories that we need to collect and lift up and share with our friends, our family, and our elected officials. So I hope you'll join us in fighting for fair housing and fair housing funding. Thanks so much. And any questions? I'm really proud of you for not screaming and leaving the room. So thanks for that.
I have a comment. We were watching the news last night. Was it the PBS News? And it said that no matter how much it appears that funds have been cut, if you look very closely, you'll find that the funds have not been cut so much, maybe 1% or so, but the funds are somewhere else. They moved them somewhere else. So look where the funds
that somebody uses. So sometimes you'll see it's been cut by a percentage. So the CFPB, for example, the total amount is actually 70% of their funds have been cut. Because if you look at the baseline of where they started, as opposed to the cuts from the first Trump administration.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. It's really just so sad to see all these actions taking place. Like, it's just like everything all at once. It's hard to like grasp the impact. My question is, how do you kind of go about assessing the impact of each of these actions and saying, okay, like, I guess prioritizing them on which ones to push back on most or fight back that are going to have most impact in the community, and then how do we message that out to members of the community so that we know, which impacts are really going to be felt, and we need to focus on these first, because it's like right now it seems like a tidal wave, and it's like, where do we go? So that's my question.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the beginning of the year, we created our priorities for the National Fair Housing Alliance, and then as this fire hose of information came, we were able to kind of sort each one of them into these buckets that you just saw, and then we have different teams doing different things. But we're also, we're stretched really thin. We have everybody doing everything all at once. So we have policy groups, we have enforcement, we have fair housing testing policy. So what we're trying to do is focus on the things that matter the most, and a lot of times right now it's the funding so that these groups can survive and live to fight another day. So that is one of our top priorities, and we are right now in the middle of budget season, and so a lot of our work is going up to the Hill and telling these stories. And you can do that too. Feel free. I do it every once in a while just for fun. I have them, Don Byer's name and everybody programmed into my phone, and I'll just call them and say, I hope the congressman will vote in favor of fair housing funds. And it's really fun. And you can just leave a message, or you can talk to somebody, and Senator Dean. And Senator Warner's is a little tougher because at one point they were so overwhelmed that they had me on hold for 20 minutes to leave a message, and then when it was my turn to talk, it just hung up, so that was not great. But, but you know what, you can still do it, while you're waiting for your coffee to brew or whatever, leave a message, because that actually matters. It matters a lot to the electeds.
Hi. Who maintains oversight for all these non-governmental organizations, not-for-profits that are advocating for fair housing, whether it's the funding entity, that's state, town? Who maintains oversight that organizations are actually, engaging in their stated missions and goals, and who maintains, accountability for actions?
Mm-hmm. So many of these grants are over several years, and actually some folks in the room might have a better sense of this because they get those grants. It's actually incredibly complicated, and that's something we've been advocating for to streamline that. So they have to go through a notice of funding availability, or a NOFO, fill out tons of paperwork, and then once they get the budget, then they have to cabinet off based on what they got the money for, and then they have to report in and keep a record. And they have technical liaisons from HUD that they have to report in. So it's no easy thing. It's not like getting a bucket of cash. That would be much more fun, but it's not like that at all. It's actually really heavily regulated, and so hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, sorry. Question.
Hi, I'll ask the follow-up question. So these are nonprofits. Can you say something about how nonprofits are organized and how they work with their boards of directors and have other funding sources beyond their HUD grants that keep their doors open and how they're connected to their communities?
Yeah, and some folks from the organizations here might want to talk about that too. So yes, in addition, they have they have the nonprofit laws. So they have boards of directors. They have to provide annual reports. Some of them do have other sources at the National Fair Housing Alliance. Some of our grants have been cut midstream, and these are signed contracts. And these are grants that have been around for decades. The Fair Housing Initiative programs actually started under Ronald Reagan. So these are programs that have long had bipartisan support and have funded and done good work in communities across the nation. So yes, in addition to the federal oversight, then they also have to comply with the local and state nonprofit law. And so you'll see the annual reports. They have the, every nonprofit is tracked on ProPublica. You can look up any nonprofit's information anytime. Does that help? Did you want to say more about that? No? Okay. Do either of you want to say more about that? No? Okay.
I mean, as a this is loud. Okay. So I'm Susan Planning, I'm over at the Equal Rights Center. Just as some background information on accountability efforts, we are a nonprofit organization that has very specific rules from the IRS. We undergo audits on an annual basis to check our finances. I fielded an email from our HUD grant rep this week asking about a discrepancy of 22 cents in our financial report of a couple, $100,000. It was in Excel rounding. I just didn't have the column showing the full amount. But there is extremely strong